This is your mentor and educator Siddhi Bangard. So let's start today's session. And today we'll be discussing India-Nepal Part 2. Briefly about me, I'm Siddhi Bangard. 3 years of teaching experience and appeared for civil services, both mains and interviews. And did my post-graduation from XLRI Jamshedpur in HR. Folks, at Unacademy, you get daily live classes. I'm already taking live classes on Unacademy for prelims mock test series. Live test and quizzes. So after every 3 sessions, you get live test and quizzes to actually check your preparation. Whenever there is a course mode going on Academy Plus, you have subscribed to any course on Academy Plus. So there is a live test after every 3 sessions so that you can revise and check your preparation. All our courses are structured as per the UPSC syllabus so that you do not miss out on anything. And one subscription of Unacademy provides you unlimited access to all the greater than 200 courses that are available on our platform. So you can choose the educator from whom you want to be taught, and you can also choose the course you want to take at present. It's like you don't have to be present all the time, just like in offline classes. You can go and watch the live, recorded, and be updated about the upcoming lectures. Also, we have the top educators from around the country. So the class is as good as the teacher is. So Brunal is teaching there, Sudarshan is teaching there, Roman is there, and a lot of other people who are very good teachers are already there. We are covering the entire length and breadth of civil services, right from prelims examination to the interview preparation and essay writing. So it's a complete course. The platform itself completely provides you for every need which is there for UPSC: mentoring, preparation for prelims, mains, and interviews, and obviously question solving, quizzes, notes, everything is provided on our platform. 1 year subscription costs you 44,000, which comes down to less than 40,000 if you use our code SBUS, Siddhi Bangard on Unacademy Plus, and no cost EMI is available for our 6-month, 12-month, and 24-month subscription. For our 2-year courses, the cost comes down from 64,000 to 58,000 if you use my code SBUS. That means per year cost reduces to less than 29,000, which is a pretty good bargain given that 1 year course actually costs you less than 40,000. If you take a 2-year subscription, it costs you less than 29,000 per year, and obviously no cost EMI is available for 6-month, 12-month, and 24-month subscription. With that, let's begin today's session. So under India Eastern Neighbours Part 2, we will actually be discussing India and Nepal relations further. In Part 1, actually we discussed the India-Nepal relationships, the history of the India-Nepal relationships. In India and its Eastern Neighbours Part 2, we will be discussing the agreements and disagreements with Nepal and the way forward. So here, how will we proceed is, we'll first discuss the agreements with Nepal, that what are the areas on which we cooperate with Nepal, and then we'll discuss the areas on which we have issues or tussle with Nepal. The issues will go a little bit more and deeper because they have been in news of late. For example, the recent map issue in which Nepal came out with a new map claiming that Kala Pani, Limpi Adhura and Lipu Lake belong to Nepal. So we'll understand that issue in detail and what are the boundary disputes we have. We'll actually try to get to the bottom of the issues that we have with Nepal. So it's, as I mentioned when I was discussing India-China also, it's not the boundary, it's just not the boundary, it's always not the border dispute. There are some underlying notions which actually make it very, very difficult for countries to resolve their issues. And most of the times it is the distress that has been caused due to some events in the past. So as we already discussed previously, that India has chosen to economically block Nepal whenever India wanted Nepal to act in a way whenever India wanted Nepal to act in a way that India wanted. And that has really not gone down with the little Himalayan nation that is flanking our northern borders and is a buffer state between India and China. So we'll discuss all of that, and then we'll discuss what India can actually do to allay Nepal's concerns and to maintain the good relationships we have had with Nepal so far. And in the upcoming session, we will be discussing India and Eastern Neighbours Part 3. That will be only one session. In a single session, we will be discussing the India-Sri Lanka issue. So guys, brace up for today. Today's session will be a little long but very interesting because we'll understand all the stories and theories that we have about Nepal. Okay, India, as we know, we already know this. I'm not discussing this again, but I kept it just in case we need to refer to it again. Here, I would again like to recall a few things about Nepal. We have almost a 1800-kilometer boundary with Nepal, spanning over 5 states of India, right? Starting from Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, Sikkim, all these actually form a boundary with India. These boundaries are manned by Sahastra Seema Bal. Also remember that the boundary that we have at Kalapani, which is a tri-junction of India, Nepal and China, is manned by the Indo-Tibetan Border Force. Nepal's population is very small as compared to India. So you can see it's a very small neighbor. And the economy is also struggling. Despite that, Nepal is extremely rich in natural resources, especially the hydropower and the water, and a very extremely fertile soil is there in Nepal. The economy has only managed to grow by $30 billion. And the constitution and the polity actually looks almost similar to the Indian parliament because the constitution has been largely influenced by India. And on the HDI index, Nepal is not doing very well. This becomes an important factor in our future discussions on where India can actually cooperate with Nepal, and what are Nepal's actually problems, because given its low HDI or low development index, Nepal is actually looking for a lot of cooperation on the infrastructure front, development in the IT and technology fields, so that it can actually provide for jobs to its people. As we saw in our last session, that Nepal's economy is primarily based on tourism and foreign employment base. That means either people come in to visit Nepal either for mountain tourism, because as we told that 8 of 10 world's highest peaks are in Nepal, or the people are actually employed on foreign lands because Nepal does not have as much employment for its own people. So these two factors actually form the backbone of India-Nepal relationships as of now. In fact, any relationship that any two countries are having now, especially India and its neighbors, will be very much economically based. In fact, as we move further from our 5th to 6th phase of foreign diplomacy, about which the 6 phases of foreign diplomacy that I've already talked about, when India acting as a balancing power to India actually getting into very energetic engagement with its neighbors, the economic policy has been actually intertwined with our foreign policy, and we need to do a similar thing here. We are actually missing out the bus here because we are constantly harping on cultural diplomacy or regional ties or very long historical ties, but you cannot miss out on the fact that it's a young, growing, democratic nation which really needs a lot of resources for its development and for its people to grow. Okay, we've already discussed these maps. I just want you to take a note of the fact that Nepal is landlocked by India on 3 sides. How did that happen? On the southern flank, India is already there. On the western flank, India is already there. And after the acquisition of Sikkim in 1975, again, India became its boundary neighbor on the eastern flank too. I'll just change the color of the pen so that everybody is able to see it clearly. So you can see, west we have India, south we have India, and east also India's presence is there. So instead of saying Nepal is landlocked, it is better to say Nepal is India-locked. Right? Okay. Let's come to the next point. So what is the importance of Nepal in our relationships? The importance of Nepal is that Nepal shares borders with 5 Indian states, as I just mentioned. Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, one of our hugely populous states. West Bengal, again a state with high population density. Sikkim, one of our northern regions where we have a border with China, so very strategically important region. And Bihar, one of the most lawless states of India, yet very resource rich, and forms a very contiguous border with Nepal. In fact, Bihar has a huge historical tie with Nepal. It is also called Roti Beti Ka Rishta. A lot of women from Nepal are married into Indian families, and a lot of women from India are married into Nepalese families. A lot of Indians actually go and work in Nepal. A lot of Nepalis come and work in India. And they have a huge significance in Bihar. We will see how, because Bihari population, the northern part of Bihar or the Terai region of Bihar is actually contiguous with the Terai region of Nepal. And these regions actually have these communities called Madhesis. You must have heard a lot about them in the news. Madhesis, the Tharus, and the Janjatis. These were the three communities which actually protested when the constitution of Nepal was being made, and they actually populate the entire Nepali Terai region. I will talk about what the Terai region in Nepal is. If you can see it here only in the map, the border that Nepal has, the southern border here, is basically the Terai region. So the southern border of Nepal is contiguous with the Indo-Gangetic plains. That is the entire Terai region. It's a very, very fertile part of land, all right, and is actually drained by rivers Karnali, Gandaki and Koshi. And that's why it's very, very fit for growing all sorts of crops. And all these communities about which I just mentioned, Madhesis, Tharus and Jandatis actually live in this area. And they had strong reservations regarding Nepal's constitution, and that's why India had to intervene. Now, Nepal is also actually, Nepal, if we look at like this, Nepal is trapezoidal in shape. And the northern part of Nepal is known as Himal or snow-clad. The middle part is known as Pahad. This region is not covered with snow, and the average mountain height here is between 800 to 4000 meters. The Himal region actually has all the peaks, 8 out of 10 8,000ers peaks. That means mountain peaks greater than 8,000 meters. And the last region is called the Terai region. This distinction, this geographical distinction will be very, very important for us. Okay, let's move on to the next point of importance when it comes to Nepal. For Nepal, the importance of India for Nepal is at two angles. First, the strategic importance, obviously for the national security, as you can see in this picture also. It actually flanks our Himalayan region with the Chinese. So here if it is China, it actually flanks our Himalayan region with the Chinese, so it acts as a buffer state. And the second, how Nepal views India in international politics is very important, because that if the way Nepal views India is also the way the other regions or the other countries in the Indian subcontinent view India, because all are our smaller neighbors and all have some sort of constitutional problems, as we'll see in Sri Lanka also. The country has a long series of civil war, just like Nepal had between 1996 to 2006. As we have seen with Maldives, as we have seen with Pakistan, as we have seen with Bangladesh, all of the neighboring countries of India did not have a very, very stable polity unlike India. They have had their own years of civil wars. So how they view their bigger neighbor in the Indian subcontinent, that is India, is very, very important for India to know. Because if our neighbors don't view us as a friendly country, it will be very difficult for our security and our growth and prosperity. So that's another angle at which we can look at the India-Nepal relationships. Guys, if you have any doubts, please post it in the live chat section. I will take up your doubts. Yes, Aditya, you're right. During the CAA protest also, these people actually became very, very important. It was a lot in news in the Bihar region. The third is Nepal is actually right in the middle of India's Himalayan frontiers. As you can see, this is the entire Himalayan frontier. Nepal is right in the middle. And then you have Bhutan somewhere here and Bangladesh somewhere on the more eastern side. And that's why it is actually acts as a buffer state against any possible aggression from China. And that was the reason even British did not colonize it and recognize it as a friendly state back in 1923, about which we already discussed in the yesterday's session. Again, the most important thing is water resources. Both the countries, Nepal is very rich in water resources, and a lot of rivers that originate in Nepal, especially the Kosi and the Gandak, they actually feed perennial river systems in India in terms of ecology and hydropower potential. They are extremely, extremely important. So we actually cannot enrage our northern neighbor, because God forbid if water stops coming in from there, or they erect barrages with the help of China and water stops coming to India, we'll be in a deep soup. And obviously, a lot of cultural ties are there, because many of the Hindu sites, for example, the Pashupatinath temple, which our Prime Minister recently visited and has given aid for the complete reconstruction of the Pashupati temple complex. The Buddhist religious sites, Lumbini and all the other sites. In fact, Vesak was recently announced. It was Vesak is celebration of Vesak was announced in May 19. Please look up the dates for Vesak. This was announced for the 2560 years of after Buddha was born. So to celebrate the 2560 years of birth anniversary of Buddha, this was announced. Vesak was announced for 2 days in May 2019. And that was again one of the points which became irritants between India and Nepal, because Nepal changed the theme of Vesak and said that Nepal is the birthplace of Buddhism, and not just birthplace of Buddhism but also the founder of Buddhism. So with that kind of claims, definitely India had to be enraged, because yes, though Gautam Buddha was born in Lumbini and then Buddhism actually spread to the rest of the world, but when that happened, that was so much an ancient past that India and Nepal were virtually one. And actually, India has been Ashoka Empire or Ashokan Empire, the modern empire, has been pioneer in actually spreading Buddhism to far ends of the world. We already know about Dham Mahamatra. So actually, even Nepal unilaterally declared that Buddhism is foundation of Buddhism has happened in Nepal only. They have been responsible for spread of Buddhism around the world. India had to get enraged because you completely ignored Indian contributions in that, or Indian historical contributions in that. And obviously, Buddhism ties is a very, very strong religious factor, because a lot of countries in our subcontinent, be it Sri Lanka, be it Maldives, not Maldives specifically, but Nepal, Sri Lanka, China, they all follow Buddhism, and how to miss out Bhutan also. So when Buddhism has a lot of following or a lot of practice, you completely cannot take the entire claim of spreading and being the fountainhead of Buddhism to just one small country. India has its own contributions to that, and Nepal should have acknowledged that. And in fact, the reason why India got more enraged during the Vesak period, or the 2-day Vesak conference that was held in Nepal, was it was actually financed by the Chinese and it was not liked by India. So that irritant between India and Nepal relationships we'll discuss as we progress. Let's move on to areas of cooperation. Trade and economy is the area of cooperation. So India is obviously Nepal's largest trade partner, because geographically the position of India is very favorable to Nepal, and also the largest source of foreign investments in Nepal, which has now been replaced by China. Now China has maximum investment in infrastructural projects in Nepal, and obviously India provides best transit for almost the entire third country trade of Nepal, because the Kolkata port, the Haldia port, is very, very close to Nepal compared to the ports that China is providing to Nepal. We will see what kind of ports China is trying to provide to Nepal. Indian firms, a lot of Indian firms also engage in manufacturing, services, banking, insurance, dry ports, power sector and tourism in Nepal. We will not be doing areas of cooperation in detail, but we will be actually carrying forward the areas of dispute in a little bit more detail to understand the irritants in India-Nepal ties and to see what is the way forward, because they have been cooperating for a long time. So these issues are pretty much ironed out. Let's talk about the connectivity. Nepal being a landlocked country, or as I told you, Nepal being a India-locked country, it's only one side is open towards Tibet. So if you see the geography, the only side that Nepal has open is towards Tibet, where you do not have a lot of motorable roads, or the vehicular access is very, very limited. So Nepal has to kind of completely depend on India for all its needs. And India has sometimes used it unfavorably for Nepal by economically blockading it. We will also discuss that, and how that has actually been a major irritant in Nepal's in our relationship with Nepal. India-Nepal has undertaken various connectivity programs to enhance people-to-people linkages and promote economic growth and development. We have a railway link planned, all right, between Kathmandu and Raxaul. Buses already run between Delhi and Janakpur, and Varanasi and Kathmandu, Varanasi and other places in Uttar Pradesh. So the bus facility is already there. The railway facilities are underway. We are also trying to form the inland port linkage. So Kolkata port is already used by Nepal to export and import. So we have all kind of railway, bus and airplane route and the ship routes that provide connectivity between both the nations. And obviously the road route is always open between India and Nepal. We share open borders with Nepal, so people can easily traverse from Uttar Pradesh to Nepal, or can come from Nepal to Uttar Pradesh or Bihar, wherever they want to come. They are all connected by roads. And India is also looking to develop inland waterways, as I just told you, for movement of cargo within the framework of the trade and transit arrangement that were again signed in 1996, about which we discussed in yesterday's class. Providing additional access to sea for Nepal and linking it to Sagarmat. That means Mountain Everest with Sagar is just a name. So Sagarmat to Sagar. This initiative is called Sagarmat. If you all know, in Hindi, Mountain Everest is called Sagarmatha or the Sagarmatha peak. Sagarmatha to Sagar is the initiative of inland water link that India and Nepal want to build together. Let's come to the development assistance part. So obviously we provide huge development assistance to Nepal, focusing on creating infrastructure, health, water resources, education, and rural and community development. Primary being water resources. We have two big dams already planned there. The Pancheshwar Dam, which was planned long ago when the Mahakali Treaty was signed. I already discussed it. It was signed in the 1990s, but the dam is yet incomplete. And the second one, in 2014, we again signed or revived the Arun 3 project. I will talk about the Arun 3 project in detail. It is supposed to generate 900 megawatts of power, and India has already given $1 billion US aid to Nepal to actually carry ahead with this project. However, both these dam projects are actually lying in limbo. Primarily, first reason was because between 1996 to 2006, Nepal was actually under a civil war, so no construction could be carried out on the Pancheshwar Dam. And for the Arun Power project, what happened was, when it was actually started, the World Bank, which was supposed to cooperate in its construction, they withdrew. Why? Because they thought that Arun Power project, which is actually producing 9,000 megawatts of electricity, is not very helpful for the Nepalis. Why? Because it's a very huge project, and they did not know how it would impact Nepal's ecology, and whether it was actually needed for Nepal or not. So with that, the World Bank actually withdrew, and even at that point of time, Nepal and India were not on very good relationships. So that project lied in limbo. However, with Indian Prime Minister's visit in 2014, the first port of call visit after Prime Minister Modi got elected was to Nepal. At that point of time, this power project was again revived. The work is still going on. We have given the aid, but the work is not started. So this is again a major irritant in India-Nepal relationship. With that, let's come to defense cooperation. So each year, India actually trains Nepalese army and Nepalese police. They are called in here and they are given training in India. And obviously, we have the Gorkha regiment in the Indian army, and they are recruited and raised from the hill districts of Nepal. In 2001, in fact, I'll tell you a very interesting fact here. How many of you know about the fact that Indian generals, the chief of Indian armies, are given honorary position in each other's army? That means the Indian general, India's chief of army, is the honorary general of the Nepali army, and vice versa. The Nepalese chief of Nepalese army is the honorary general of Indian army. So this is the kind of arrangement we have had with Nepal since 1950s. So even when there are economic blockades, the governments are not talking to each other, the armies have actually maintained a very friendly relationship with one another. And even during the 2015 time, when there was an economic blockade of Nepal by India, the armies actually got together, the generals got together and resolved the situation when the governments were refusing to talk to. As of now, I'm not providing any PDFs because I'm still compiling them. So I will not be able to provide you with the PDF, right? Okay. So this is an important development which is here, and they have actually acted as allies even in the most difficult times, and they've actually helped diffuse the conditions whenever India and Nepal were fighting. Finally, India from 2011, every year takes joint military exercise with Nepal known as Surya Kiran. This exercise is extremely famous. What I really want you guys to know here is that India and Nepal, if you actually look at the Indian subcontinent here, right? If you actually look at it, just look at India's position as compared to its neighbors, right? When we look at that position, you see that if it was a big house, if Indian subcontinent was a big house, if this entire structure was a big house, India is actually the primary or the house head. He is the grandfather of the house. The other ones are siblings or kids. Now, you as a primary head of the house, India, cannot actually engage in petty fights with its neighbors. See, the stakes are very high for India. And not just that, being a very large and responsible country, it has to act very responsibly with India's neighborhood. Otherwise, you can actually alienate all your neighbors. In fact, that was when I discussed India's neighborhood policy, or when I was discussing the Look East policy of India. We discussed it in greater detail that your smaller neighbors, be it Nepal, be it Bhutan, be it Sri Lanka, will always have this fear of their larger neighbor, right? That it's a huge country with huge population, huge size and huge economy. It will always try to meddle in our internal politics. Now, this is something that India has to be very careful while dealing with these nations. We cannot be outright violent with them, just like we can be with China. We can actually call China and give it warnings, or we can actually, kind of give a war cry with China or Pakistan, but we can't do the same with Nepal, Sri Lanka and Bhutan. There are smaller neighbors, there are friendly neighbors, so let's keep them that way. And the Indian diplomacy has to be very astute in dealing with our smaller eastern neighbors. And that's why I'm taking a separate session completely on eastern neighbors. Let's go back to the areas of cooperation. This is the third part and the last part. Cultural ties, as I already told you, the people-to-people contacts are extremely high. The areas of art and culture are extremely high. In fact, you will be surprised to know that the Nepali Congress, which is a major opposition party right now, actually grew along with Indian National Congress, and it was formed in India. So all these prime ministers and presidents which are currently there in Nepal, they have actually studied in IIT BHU or the Banaras Hindu University. They are all a product of Indian universities only, and they have very close regional and cultural ties with India. And as I was talking about Nepali Congress, so it was actually born in India. They took their entire struggle, or they took their entire lessons in struggle or lessons in actually forming a democratic government from India. So we just don't have cultural ties, or like we tell with China that we have been brothers and we share the same borders and all that thing. It's much more deeper with Nepal. They have learned to grow along with us. They have learned to grow from our polity. They have learned from our struggles, and we have always maintained extremely close ties with no other country apart from Nepal and Bhutan. India has porous borders. So that's the kind of trust both the neighbors place into each other. And India has also signed 3 sister city arrangements, twinning with Kathmandu and Varanasi, Lumbini and Bodh Gaya, and Janakpur and Ayodhya. They are called sister cities. Janakpur is the birthplace of Sita ji. Ayodhya, obviously everybody knows. Lumbini and Bodh Gaya. Bodh Gaya in India is a major Buddhist site, and Lumbini was where actually Buddhism originated. Kathmandu and Varanasi are known as twinning cities because most of the political dispensation that you see in Kathmandu, they have actually got their education from Varanasi only. And apart from this, the cultural ties are also there in the Buddhist circuit that India is currently developing as a place of tourism, and the Ramayana circuit. So Janakpur and Ayodhya are a part of the Ramayana circuit. Lumbini and Bodh Gaya are part of the Buddhist circuit that both India and Nepal are developing jointly or developing together. Humanitarian assistance. Obviously, Nepal lies in a very ecologically fragile zone. I talked about it yesterday, that it lies in a very highly earthquake prone zone because the Indian plate is subducting the Eurasian plate, and that's why we had the Himalayas, and Himalayas are still young, and Indian plate is moving at a speed of 2 millimeter per year. So the entire Nepal belt is very, very prone to earthquakes, floods because of Kosi, and obviously so much silt comes down from Sapt Kosi. It is known as Sapt Kosi in Nepal and comes down as Kosi, which is also known as Sora of Bihar in India. So a lot of floods and earthquakes actually make Nepal very, very ecologically sensitive, and India has been regularly providing humanitarian assistance whenever there were floods or whenever there were earthquakes. Recent being the 2015 earthquake, where India was the first port of call. India went there first, along with the medicines, the doctors, and all the assistance that India could provide, along with the 1 billion US dollar 1 billion line of credit or grants. Indian community, huge number of Indians live in Nepal and huge number of Nepalis live in India. Nepali cooks, Gurkha regiment, everything is so common that we don't even find them as a part of another culture. They look like us to our own brethren. A lot of businessmen, traders, doctors, engineers, laborers actually migrate seasonally to and fro from Nepal. Multilateral partnership. India and Nepal have been the founding members of BIBIN. BIBIN is Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal collaboration. I will talk about BIBIN in later detail when I talk about Bhutan. BIMSTEC I've already talked about. Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation formed in 1997. So both India and Nepal were founding members. NAM or Non-Aligned Movement, India and Nepal were founding members. I've already discussed this in the previous lecture. And SAARC, again India and Nepal were founding members, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. Here I would like to mention one more point. Though India and Nepal are members of SAARC, but the problem has been that SAARC has actually been relegated to a backstage when it comes to India-Nepal ties. SAARC has basically been dominated by India-Pakistan ties, because SAARC is actually based on consensus formulation. So whenever India and Pakistan are not seeing eye to eye, the SAARC summit actually gets completely washed off. And the other regions are, the other neighbors, the other countries which are a part of SAARC actually find it very, very unviable. They actually absolutely hate it, because that means that India only gives importance to Pakistan and its bilateral relationships. All other countries it's not even concerned about. And you completely dominate the entire SAARC agenda by India and Pakistan, which is not done. If you want to discuss your bilateral issues, then discuss them bilaterally. It's a multilateral forum. So all the other nations should be given an equal vantage point, should be given an equal airtime of your importance of your relationship. So that is actually not happening in SAARC right now, and we could actually revive SAARC or use SAARC to revive India-Nepal relationships further. Okay. Let's come to the areas of dispute. This we will discuss a little bit more in detail. Now, as per Nepal, as I already told you, when we discuss the neighborhood policy, the smaller neighbors will always look up to their bigger neighbors with an eye of suspicion, because they feel that, you know, the bigger neighbor will always try to meddle or to interfere in the domestic politics of their country. And Nepal also feels the same. In fact, this is one of the pictures when India was asked to back off during the constitutional crisis of Nepal in 2015. I will talk about that in a greater detail, because this dispute is about that. Now, why does this actually happen? Because as per India, we're not even interested in your domestic politics. We follow the policies of Panchsheel, mutual non-interference. We follow the policies of IK Gujral or the Gujral Doctrine, mutual respect for each other's internal affairs. All right. But then why is it happening? See, for India, Nepal is not just important as a buffer state or as a friendly state. It's also important for its security vantage point of view, because Nepal lies on the northern borders with the Himalayas, and that can be, and a lot of human trafficking and terrorist activities actually happen along that border. So it is very important for us to have a peaceful and stable Nepal, and that's the only reason we want to actually interfere in Nepal's internal politics, because we do not want any confusion or any ill will going on inside the domestic politics of Nepal, because if it is politically unstable, it will give rise to terrorism and human trafficking in Nepal. In fact, human trafficking from Nepal is a very, very big issue which both countries are trying to actually address. A lot of Nepali girls are imported into India, and a lot of illegal trade in humans is actually going on in India, which is not considered good by both the countries, and both the countries are working together on it. So to work on other issues which can lead to peace, for example, the security arrangements, the trade arrangements, or the infrastructure project developments, it is important that there is peace in the domestic politics of Nepal. And India, being a responsible country in the neighborhood, just tries to actually involve itself in the domestic policy to get a peaceful and stable neighbor. Now, what has Nepal's problem been? Nepal feels that India tries to actually do or influence its domestic politics to keep Nepal within its orbit of influence, which is to an extent correct. India does not want its smaller neighbors to actually go into the lap of China. But as I have told yesterday also, and as I will tell you again today, in the times of globalization, all you can do to keep your neighbors in influence is to help them infrastructure wise, to help them money wise, or to actually cement up your cultural ties. You can use your soft power and hard power, but you can definitely not go and meddle in their domestic politics. It will not be liked by them. And you definitely cannot control their foreign relations, because each of these nations are sovereign, and India being a sovereign and republic state of its own, and a responsible one being at that, we have to actually respect the other smaller neighbors' sovereignty. So that part has to be sorted down and down. Okay. No, it is not a diplomatic failure because of the Kala Pani issue. It is a diplomatic failure because the entire agenda has always been hogged by the India-Pakistan eyes. I will just give you a very small example. So, when in 2014 our Prime Minister Modi, he took the oath, all the SAARC nations were called in the swearing or the oath ceremony. Modi really wanted to take Indo-Pakistan relations ahead in line with what Manmohan Singh had been doing or what Atal Bihari Vajpayee had been doing in the past. However, how it ended was that we had Uri attacks, we had Pulwama attacks, and we had all those attacks which did not go well down with India, and India decided to have surgical attacks. That means India-Pakistan relations were at an all-time low, and they are still at an all-time low. Fast forward to 2019, again Prime Minister Modi was sworn in, and this time the SAARC countries were not invited. Why? Because India and Pakistan could not see eye and eye. So the entire agenda of the SAARC nations was washed off, and instead the BIMSTEC countries were called in. He said we will look further east, and that's when the Act East policy was given in 2019. So can you see that just because India and Pakistan could not see eye to eye, the SAARC nations were not even invited. The neighbors were invited from some other forum. The Eastern neighbors were invited. So that way is you're actually kind of completely sidelining the SAARC, which is not a good thing. So that's what is happening. That's why the SAARC is getting washed off, because no other country is being given the limelight. No other nation is being given the limelight. The entire agenda is being hogged by India-Pakistan relations, the two large neighbors in the SAARC conglomeration. I hope I've answered your question. New Delhi in the past supported the institution of now. New Delhi has always been confused, as we studied yesterday. If you look at Nepal's history, so before 1950s until 1960s, between 18th century, the second half of the 18th century, till 1960s, Nepal was ruled by a monarchy. All right? And India supported that monarchy. Then in 1960s, it was overthrown, the monarchy was overthrown, and the Koirala government came in. So for some time, there was democracy. We supported democracy also. And again, then in 2000s or in 1990s, the monarchy again came back. All right? Prince Gyanendra, Prince Birendra, they actually again took back in 1990s. India again started supporting them. And then in 2005 or 2006, when King Birendra tried to completely get the executive powers to himself to control the Madhesi movement or to control the civil war or the Maoist movement in Nepal, India again started opposing the monarchy. So Indian response to Nepal has not been consistent. Either you support the monarchy or you oppose the monarchy. You can't do both as per your convenience. And do you know why we were actually opposing the monarchy then? Because the European Union and the US asked us to do that. At that point of time, if you remember, during 2005 and 2006, India was extremely close to the European Union and US because the nuclear deal had just happened. And that had happened the Western nations had a very huge influence on us, and they told us that go and tell Nepal that monarchy is not okay. They should have a democracy because that's what those Western nations believed in, and you should go and interfere and you should tell them how to make their constitution. You should go and tell them how to run their polity. And India actually went ahead and did that. So that was one reason which actually spoiled the relationships. The second reason why India actually intervened during the constitutional crisis, that is during 2008 to 2015, when the Nepalese constitution was being made, was because the Madhesis, the Janjatis and the Tharus, they are all part of the Terai region, which actually shares a border with the Bihar border with the Nepal. Now, that year when the constitution was being made, that is 2014-2015, if the Madhesi movement was not controlled, it was actually becoming a little bit more violent, and they were not letting the constitution being formed. So what India wanted, that the Nepalese dispensation, political dispensation, should take into consideration all the concerns of the Madhesis, Tharus and Janjatis for two reasons. First, because all these three ethnic communities shared very close ties with India. So there were Indian sentiments involved. The second reason is that if Nepal still remains violent and if the issue of constitution is not settled, that dispute would actually spill over into Bihar, and Bihar was actually undergoing elections. Bihar was supposed to undergo elections that time, and we could not actually take any political uncertainty in Bihar at that point of time. And that was the reason India was actually very much interested in settling up the constitutional crisis within Nepal. However, the way India intervened and the way India was directing Nepal, it was not taken very well by the Nepalese people, and the constitution was passed without even taking India's agreement to it, and India also responded very neutrally towards the passing of the constitution. Instead of China, which actually congratulated Nepal on becoming a republic and welcoming democracy there, India gave a very, very cold response towards Nepal's formulation of the constitution and said that we have noted that you've made a constitution and that's okay. We're really not concerned. And S. Jaishankar, our then Foreign Affairs Secretary and our current Foreign Affairs Minister, was then sent to Nepal to actually change the constitution after it was made, which was not taken very positively by the Nepalese political dispensation. So that is the reason, because India has been constantly confused when it comes to Nepal. So because of that, Nepal has been at a difficulty to understand what India actually wants, and because of the constant confusion that India has in dealing with Nepal in its constitutional realm, Nepal actually considers India to be actually interfering into Nepalese politics as and when India chooses to, and only keeps its own national interest above everything else. So as per Nepal, what India is only concerned about is its own interest in Nepal. It is not concerned about Nepal's well-being, and that is one of the major irritants that Nepal has with India. In fact, the current boundary issue is also nothing but that distrust which has been caused by that continuous meddling that India has been doing in Nepal. In fact, very recently, yes, New Delhi always took a U-turn. Jatin, have I answered your doubt? I think I have, but if you have any doubts, you can please ask further. Yes, New Delhi has always taken a U-turn because even our foreign policy hasn't been very sovereign. It's only, as I have told you, if you look back, everything goes back to those 6 phases of foreign policy that we have had. So between 1991 to 1999, we were trying to have strategic autonomy. And between 2002 and between 1999 to 2013 or in the 2000s, we were actually trying to balance our position vis-a-vis China in the Asia Pacific, and we were trying to balance that. We were much closer to the Western world. So whatever we were doing in our foreign policy domain with our neighbors or anybody else was actually dominated by what the Western powers were telling us. So it is all intricately linked to the phases of foreign policy that India has been following. So India-Nepal relationships have never been only about India-Nepal relationships. They have been constantly modified and impacted by the environmental factors that have affected India's sovereignty or India's foreign policy from the outside. And we have actually taken that forward with Nepal too. So that's how it has actually happened. I hope I have answered your question. Lastly, India was also blamed for the unofficial economic blockade as a pressure tactic to bring political influence in Kathmandu, which contributed to souring of bilateral relationships towards the end of 2015. So India has economically blocked Nepal twice, once in 1989-90 and again in 2015. And after the 1989-90, we actually signed the treaty, the Trade and Transit Treaty separately with Nepal, which is still going on and is now up for renewal. And towards the end of 2015, I already told you about it. So since Nepal was not listening to the Madhesis, Tharus and Janjatis prominently, and it was not listening to what New Delhi was saying, New Delhi was said, okay, fine, we'll block all the land routes, the rail routes, the port routes, and let's see what happens to your economy. And then you will obviously give in. So it looked like something like this. This is a very apt cartoon. So India actually blocked all the oil supplies to Nepal during this recent 2015 blockade. It completely strangled Nepal. This was a cartoon that actually came in the Nepali newspapers. And this is again another cartoon that came in the Nepali newspapers. So everybody was confused, be it the Nepali Congress, the CPN UML or UCPNM. They are all the three major political parties in Nepal. And at that point of time, Nepal was already undergoing a constitutional crisis. So blockade was not taken very well by Nepal. This was aptly shown in both in Indian and Nepalese media. So Nepal actually blames India for that blockade. Why unofficially? Because India says that we did not have economic blockade. It's only the Madhesis who actually live in the border areas between Nepal and India. They blocked the border and they did not let the supplies go in. So Nepal was like, it's a 1100-kilometer long border. A small community like Madhesis is not capable of blocking the entire border unless India supports it. So there was a tacit support from India or a covert support from India, which has actually resulted in that kind of blockade. And Nepal actually does not like it. So Nepalese displeasure was very, very clearly communicated to India. Let's see the last point. What happened during the humanitarian assistance? Humanitarian assistance is one of the areas where we converge with Nepal, and we actually screwed that up also. So when the earthquake hit Nepal in 2015 and the entire Kathmandu valley was completely devastated, India was the first one to respond in a non-military and assistive role. However, dispelling the hegemonic perception about India, instead of dispelling that notion that India is a regional hegemon, Indian media were allegedly actually told to be or allegedly marked as insensitive and biased in their coverage of the disaster. So do you know what actually happened when the Indian media, what did they do? Indian media started eulogizing the army there. Army took the aid for Nepal. So all the coverage of the Indian media was related towards showing Nepal in a bad light, that look, it's such a poor country, they don't have anything, and also singing paeans about the Indian army. So it was not a time to sing paeans about the Indian army. It's our job as a neighbor to go and assist our neighbors, right? It's not a very good thing that we are doing, and even if we are doing that, we are supposed to be mature about it. We are not supposed to show the poverty in Nepal and the prosperity in India and then compared it to and say, look, India is acting as a big brother. It looked very cheap. The way the Indian media behaved there looked very, very cheap. And Nepal has not taken it very well, because no self-respecting country will like to be portrayed like that in the foreign media. Yes, it can be. If we act more maturely, if we act like actual big brother, if we act like a responsible nation, the border issue, as we'll just discuss, is a very, very small issue with Nepal. It can be handled in a very, very peaceful manner, just like we did with Bangladesh, because we are on very good terms with Nepal. There is only a slight confusion in the boundary demarcations. And if we sit down and talk, which we've been trying to do, but we have not taken very seriously, Nepal actually brought the issue back in notice in 1998. So if we try to sit peacefully with Nepal, we can actually resolve it. But there are some other things that have entered into the equation, that is the Chinese influence. So first we'll have to counter the Chinese influence before we can actually settle the border disputes with Nepal. So that's the answer to your question. Let's move on to the second area of dispute, that is the infrastructure projects. As I already mentioned, Nepal is a landlocked country with a population that is continuously rising, and it needs to industrialize in order to develop. So for that, it needed large dams and hydropower, electricity. You always need energy, is the prerequisite to any development. However, India promised a lot, but could not develop the river water resources to produce the required hydropower to meet the needs of the growing economy. In fact, the water agreements that were concluded with India, whether it be the Sarda barrage that was built by India on Mahakali, the Kosi barrage which was built in 1954, or the Gandak barrage which was built in 1959 by India, they have not been taken very positively. So first, we have not been able to actually complete the hydropower plants that we have promised India would actually complete. The second have been that all those actually treaties have been more favorable to India. Earlier, when the monarchs were ruling that country, they only wanted favors from India. So they did not actually pay much attention to the way the rivers were being developed or the hydropower plants were being developed. So it is actually a perception in Nepal that all these hydropower agreements are more in favor of India than in favor of Nepal. And they now view India with a lot of suspicion in developing their hydropower resources. And of course, India's failure to develop or deliver on its commitments regarding developing of those hydropower resources. As I just told you, under the Mahakali Treaty, we were supposed to develop the Pancheshwar Dam, and under the recent 2014 visit of our Prime Minister Modi to Nepal, we were supposed to develop the Arun 3 power plant project, which will produce 9,000 megawatts of electricity, the largest hydropower project in Nepal, which is under construction. And when completed, it will produce as much power as Nepal is producing today. So one power project will actually produce the electricity for the entire nation, which can also be further used to export back to India. I will use this point, so please remember this point on hydropower projects, because how this entire thing will be useful is that if India actually exports power from Nepal back to India, we will be in some measure able to bridge the deficit that India has with Nepal in terms of trade relations. So India has a positive trade balance with Nepal. India exports in billions and imports in millions from Nepal, and Nepal has been trying to bridge that trade gap. So if we start exporting electricity from Nepal to India, to the Bihari regions or the region of Bihar, we will actually be able to allay Nepal's concern regarding some of the trade deficit gaps that we have with Nepal. So that point is very, very important, and we'll use that later. So that's a cartoon that I want to bring to your notice here. Incomplete infrastructure projects. So both countries have actually, this whole cartoon was about. So India has mostly been interested in building mega power projects in Nepal, as we just discussed the Arun 3 power project, which has a wattage capacity of 900 watts. So the governments have been actually overlooking the smaller rivers. For example, the Pandai river, which is a transboundary river between India and Nepal. So Nepal says, or some of the factions in Nepal says, that it would be better if you could actually go with the smaller hydropower projects first and then go with the major hydropower projects. Because for the smaller hydropower projects, the ecological displacement or the population displacement is also very less, and it can be utilized quickly. So the results can be seen quickly rather than the mega power projects which keep getting stuck over and again, which actually lead to the belief that India is not doing enough from its side to actually take those mega power projects forward. So this is all that cartoon is about. Let's move on to the third area of dispute. Any doubts till now? I will take a pause here. If you have anything that you want to ask as of now. And are you guys finding this entire presentation interesting? Because I've really worked hard on it. So we are covering the entire India-Nepal issue in greater detail here. It will be too heavy on details, but I've tried to make it as interesting as I can. Any doubts so far? Anything that you want to ask? If you want to ask, post it in the live chat section. I will answer you. All right. And please let me know. I hope nobody is getting bored. Don't sleep, people. It's morning. All right. Don't sleep. Okay. Let's look at the third part, India-Nepal border dispute. So it's one of the areas of disputes. These are some funny thank you, Rishabh. These are some funny cartoons that I found. Okay, it's regarding the Lipi Adhura, Lipu Lake, and the Kalapani area that we are fighting. This one, Modi and Oli wake up the next day to find different maps in their hands. So that's why they are looking at the map issue, the recent map issue which was in news. And this was one cartoon that was there in the Nepali media. Can you see this hook? This hook is actually the Kalapani. So Nepal is trying to poke India with the Kala Pani issue. So this was also in the Nepalese newspapers that I've brought to you here. All right. Thank you, Amit. Okay, great. Any questions, guys? Please post it in the live chat section. I will look up to that. Currently, India and Nepal have border disputes in two regions. One is the Kalapani Limpi Adhura Lepu Lake Tri-Junction. Tri-Junction means it's a border shared between China, India, and Nepal. I will show it to you on the map to actually make you understand it better. And the Susta area, this is the West Champaran district in Bihar. Susta is a very funny case, and so is Kalapani. Both are actually related to the watershed boundaries, so I will tell you more about it. Actually, I'll tell you here only about it, how it is actually happening. So, when I'm talking about watershed and why is it important? Do you know that all our international boundaries, majority of our international boundaries are along the rivers? Indo-Pak is along the Indus River, governed by the Indus Treaty of 1960. All right. Indo-China is along the watershed of Brahmaputra. All right. Indo-Bangladesh is along the Ganges or Padma as it is called in Bangladesh. Indo-Nepal is along two rivers, the Mahakali or the Kali river and the Gandak river. Okay. Now, as you can see, all our neighborhood boundaries are defined by the rivers wherever we have that. And with Indo-Bhutan, it is the Indo-Bhutan, it is the Teesta river, which flows through Sikkim and West Bengal. All right. Yes, you're right. Still, the project is under construction, even though. So, the reason why the projects are under construction is, first of all, they are mega power projects. They require a huge manpower, huge investment to go into to actually construct them. The second thing, the terrain in Nepal is very difficult for construction of these projects, and these projects actually take a lot of time to be constructed. The third reason has been, it's only now that Nepal has settled a little bit. Otherwise, between 1996 to 2006, as I've told you repeatedly, it has been a time of civil war. So even when we concluded the Mahakali Treaty back in 1990s, we could not actually move ahead with the Pancheshwar Dam because the conditions, the political conditions were not suitable. So for any infrastructure project to go through, the political conditions have to be suitable. Now, coming back to this point, why did I want you to know about the watershed regions? Because the Kalapani lies in the watershed region of the Kali River, and the Susta region lies in the watershed region of the Gandak River, which I will also show you on the map. So just remember the names of these two rivers which are under dispute, because it is basically the shifting boundary of these two rivers, the Kali River and the Gandak River, which has actually caused this dispute. Let's understand how. Coming to the Kalapani region, Kalapani is basically a village which is there in the Pithoragarh district of Uttarakhand, the hook that we talked about. It's here, it's in this hook that Kalapani is there, all right? And it is actually situated on the Kailash Mansarovar route. We will study why we are actually interested in it. So Kalapani is a very strategically advantageous location for us. It is located at a height of over 20,000 feet and serves as an observation post for India to look at the Chinese. Since it's at the India-Chinese-Nepal junction, it is used by India as a observation post. The Kali River in the Kalapani region actually demarcates the border between India and Nepal. So before going to the text, I would like to take you to the maps first. Guys, is the map visible to everybody? This is a Google map rendition of the Kalapani River. This entire blue line that you can see here, this blue line and this blue line and this blue line is the Kalapani River. Okay. In this map, you can see where Kalapani is actually. So look at this. This is the Mansarovar Lake. It's very close to the Kalapani border. Can you see it here? Guys, is the map clearly visible? Because it is easy to understand from the map. Yes? Okay. This is the Kalapani region here and this is the Mansarovar lake here. Also remember the name of this place called Dharchula. I will tell you why we are actually considering it. Now, look at the Kalapani river. The Lipu lake passes here and the Kalapani village is here. And as you can see in the figure, all these three tributaries, this Teragad, Lipugad, Linthigad and Pankhagad and Kalapani river original, they actually all converge here at Kalapani campground here. So that's in India. There is another pass called the Tinker Pass, which is in the Nepalese boundary. All right. Now, understand it, how it is actually going on. Back in 1815, 1816, as I had mentioned in yesterday's lecture, so if you have watched yesterday's lecture, you will recognize 1815 to 1816, a war was fought between the British and Nepal. The war was actually fought over this region, the entire Uttarakhand region, which is also known as the Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh region, which is also known as the Garhwal Kumaon region, right? And some parts of Sikkim, some parts of Terai. So that was where the war was fought, and it was actually a Nepalese aggression into Indian territory. Nepal actually attacked India that during the British times, and they wanted to actually occupy these regions. So at that point of time, the Garhwal and Kumaon regions were already with Nepal. They wanted just some additional territory of Sikkim and some additional territory of the Terai region, which I have already discussed. They wanted to do that, and Britain also did not take them very seriously. So initially Britain started to lose because Gurkhas are very, very strong. As I've mentioned in yesterday's lecture, it was the Gurkha time. It was the kingdom established by the Gurkhas, Prithviraj Shah, that they tried to attack India. But later on, the British army took over and threw the Nepalis out of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand or the Garhwal Kumaon region, and also out of the Sikkim region. And that war actually defined the present boundaries Nepal has with India. That war actually led to the Sugauli Treaty, which was actually signed in Bihar. Sugauli is in Bihar. That treaty was signed in Bihar between between British India and Nepal in 1815-1816. As per that treaty, the boundary between India and Nepal was supposed to be the Kali river. All right, this river. So Kalapani is basically what? Kalapani is not a standalone river. Kalapani is the headwaters or one of the tributaries of the Kali river, which you can see here, it's a transboundary river which forms the boundary between India and Nepal. So the Kali river is also fed by the Kalapani river, which actually accumulates itself into the Kalapani village. Now what happened? As per the British and Nepal, earlier the Kali river, which actually forms the watershed between the boundary, which you can see here, Kali river exactly runs along the international boundary, this region. Can you see my pen in yellow? This region. So Kali river runs around here. So the initial boundary was here. But in 1865, Britain actually modified its position and said that instead of following the river path, we will follow the watershed path. That means where the river is actually dividing the Indian boundary. Okay, that means that it was the river that was considered and not the tributaries which were finally forming the river that was considered. That means the Lipu Lake Pass then actually started to be recognized as a part of India, because it is only contributing towards the tributaries of the Kalapani river and it is not actually the Kalapani river. And according to the British, the boundary only starts at the Kalapani river, which converges at the Kalapani village. So as of now, Nepal is saying that as per us, since the river, the Kalapani river actually starts in Lipu Lake, the Lipu Lake area should be given to Nepal, because it's where the river is starting, and as per the Sugauli Treaty, this area should be given to us. India says that no, as per the Sugauli Treaty, it's the watershed that defines the boundary as per the 1865 revision by British, and since then it has been so in the Indian maps also. So the river actually starts from Kalapani village, where the tributaries of the Kalapani river actually meet and finally fall into the Kali river. So we cannot give you the Lipu Lake Pass, and also it is very strategically important to India. Now, this is the issue in Kalapani. Let's come to the Dharachula part. The Dharachula part which is there in Nepal. As per Nepal, Kalapani should be a part of the Dharchula province in Nepal. Nepal is divided into 7 provinces and Dharachula being one of them. So it says that Kalapani should be a part of Dharachula and not should be a part of the Pithoragarh district in Uttarakhand. So please give us Kalapani back, because you include the headwaters of Kalapani river into the boundary. So the boundary actually starts from Lipu Lake Pass. So this entire area from Kalapani to Lipu Lake should actually go into Nepal rather than be with India. So that is what Nepalese claim is, and that's what the new map Nepal has come up with. Are you guys with me till here? Have you understood what is the Kalapani issue exactly? Is it clear? Because then I'll be discussing some details about the Tinker Pass also, and the timeline by which this whole entire issue has happened. So I'll summarize this entire issue now. Everybody has understood this? How it is happening? What it is happening? Where is the difference? Because I'll be summarizing it one more time. So if you've not understood, I'll be summarizing it again. But now I'll be going chronologically of how the issue is actually turned around in the international media. Okay. So let's go to this part. So as I told you, according to Nepal's claim, Kalapani should be in Dharchula district in the Sudar Paschim Pradesh or the province of Nepal. Okay. Now let's come to the Susta region. Then we'll go into the summary of the entire region. All right. Okay. Let's go talk to the Susta region. So the Susta region, again, it's a very funny thing, as I told you. The Susta region is in dispute because earlier, as per the 1815-16 treaty, the Sugauli treaty, Susta actually lied in Nepal. You will be surprised to know that we have been, why is it in dispute? If it lies in Nepal, then give it to Nepal. So I'll tell you, look at the map here. This is the Bihari boundary and this is the Susta region. All right. Now, and look at this map. Can you see the Narayani river and the Gandak river here? This is the Narayani river. And this is the trellis pattern of the rivers. It's not the dendritic, it's the trellis pattern of the rivers, if you know geography. This is the Narayani river or the Gandak river as it is called in India. It's called Gandak in India and Narayani in Nepal. Right? This region. And Susta is here. Now what happens between Gandak and Narayani is that, as you can see a larger picture here, it's the West Champaran district in Bihar is also called the West Navalparsi district in Nepal. Now Gandak is a transboundary river. When it is in India, it is called Gandak. When it is in Nepal, it is called Narayani river. Susta is a village which is on the banks of the Narayani river or the Gandak river. Now the problem with all these Himalayan rivers is they bring in a lot of silt. As we already know, Nepal is a highly mountainous area. In fact, the major chunk of Nepal is a highly mountainous area or the Himal region. With that, when it brings a high amount of silt, these rivers, the Gandak river, actually keeps shifting its course. So imagine if the Gandak river, instead of flowing like this, if it starts flowing somewhere from here, right? Somewhere a little western into the Indian territory, or we start having the Gandak river flowing from here or from here, this entire region, Susta region, starts coming into Bihar. So how does the Gandak divide? So the western part of the Gandak belongs to Nepal and the eastern part of the Gandak actually belongs to India. So if the Gandak river moves a little bit more into the western part, the Susta starts belonging to Nepal. But if it moves a little bit towards the Nepalese part, if it changes its course and comes here, the Susta starts belonging to the Bihari region. And that is what is actually causing the dispute. So as of now, the current status is that since the path of the Gandak river has changed, and as you can see here, Susta is actually falling into the West Champaran district. So Nepal says that, look, let's follow the path of the Gandak river as it was in 1850, and as per that, Susta should actually belong to Nepal and not to India. But India says that we will not recognize the 1850 boundary of Gandak river. We will recognize the Gandak river as it is because it is not mentioned in the Sugauli Treaty that Gandak River boundary has to be recognized as per the 1815 flow or trajectory of the river. It only says that Gandak River will be the transboundary river which will determine the boundary between India and Nepal. So we will follow the current boundary, and as per that the Susta lies in the Indian side of the boundary. So that's the Susta dispute for you. Now let's come to the summary of dispute, how everything happened. So in 1980s, both India and Nepal set up a joint technical level boundary working group to delineate India-Nepal boundary. We and Nepal both being a very no. Now the Kalapani region is in India. It's not in Nepal. It actually lies in India only. It's not in Nepal. I hope that answers your question, Aditya. It's in India only. It's in the Pithoragarh district of Uttarakhand. The only distinguished, so I'll explain you that here again. The only difference is the way in which we see the Kali river originating. For them, for Nepal, the Kali river originates at the Lipu Lake Pass. For us, the Kali river originates at the Kalapani point. So whatever is the origin of the Kali river actually determines the starting of the boundary between India and Nepal. So if Nepal feels that Kali river originates in the Lipu Lake Pass, then the Lipu Lake Pass should actually belong to Nepal along with the Kalapani. But we believe that Kalapani is actually the starting point of the Kali river. So Kalapani till Kalapani starting from Lipu Lake should actually belong to us. So that's the dispute in the way we see where the headwaters of the Kali river actually lie. That's where the dispute is. Is it clear? Is it clear? Are you sure? Okay. So back in 1980s, we sent up this joint technical level boundary working group to settle our border areas. Alright, so the group demarcated everything. The rest of the boundaries completely settled except for the Kalapani and the Sustar area because the rivers keep changing their courses. And at that point of time, the technology wasn't very great to actually determine the correct source of Kali river or to actually determine what's the correct course of Gandak river. And we were not even really concerned about Nepali neighbors, and Nepal was also not very concerned about India because the trust issues were not that bad at that point of time. Nepal was a very friendly country towards India. So we left them to be discussed on a later date. So why did the issue flare up only now? So as you know, in 1991, in 1962, we had a deadly war with China. And post that, we closed every diplomatic relationship with China that we had. And it is only in 1980s that India started resetting its diplomatic relations with China. And finally in 1991, India and China, when India was opening, when the LPG reforms were made, India and China decided to open the Lipu Lake Pass, alright, for trade and for passing of the pilgrims to Kailash Mansarovar. So Lipu Lake Pass is the pass from where Indians actually enter Chinese territory. Can you see here? This is the pass from where we can enter into China. This is China. The Tinker Pass is in Nepal. And this is India. And that's why Lipu Lake is strategically very important for India, because from here it is that the pilgrims go through the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. And I also wanted to tell you something about the Tinker Pass. So the Tinker Pass was actually a boundary dispute between China and Nepal. And finally the Tinker Pass is now with Nepal, and the Bhotiyas of Uttarakhand actually carry out their trade from the Tinker Pass. Once the Lipu Lake Pass was closed earlier, the Bhotiyas of Uttarakhand actually went to the Tinker Pass to do their trade with Nepal and China. They used to pass through the Tinker Pass or the Tinker Valley in Nepal. Now that the Lipu Lake Pass is again open, the Bhotiyas of Uttarakhand can actually go through the Lipu Lake Pass. Look, Rishabh, when it comes to the main answer writing, they will never focus on one dispute. They will never tell you that, okay, write something about the Kala Pani dispute. What they'll be writing about is how the question will look like is that in the current scenario or in the current way the dispute has played up, whether it be the constitutional dispute, whether it be the boundary dispute, it has some deeper meanings to it. So actually fill out the deeper meanings of those disputes. That will be the question and the way forward. So what are you supposed to write in there is not about the disputes. Your disputes or these 4 areas of disputes, they will only cover the introduction part of it. So how will you write the answer? It will be something like, okay, India and Nepal have very huge cultural, religious ties dating back to the ancient times. They have always been friendly neighbors, and there is a lot of economic ties also involved. Then next you come to the 4 points of dispute, that these are the areas where we are having major irritants. All right. But why did we have those irritants will be your next part, that we are having these irritants because there are distrust issues. India has not been able to complete certain power projects. Nepal is getting very impatient and is trying to play the China card. So all that is there. And finally, you conclude with the way forward. So you will have to cover everything, because the question will not just come about the dispute. The question will actually come about how to better the India-Nepal relationships. And why is the reason why the question will be asked in that format and not in the form of dispute is because as a civil servant, you're not required to know the dispute. You are required to give a solution to the dispute. So the major chunk of your answer will be how to actually overcome the challenge that India and Nepal are facing, right? So the way forward, which can only be properly discussed if you understand this dispute very well. So the entire introductory part of your answer will be made up of the dispute and the ties you have had in the past. The body of your answer will include what is the current scenario, what can we further do about it, and the conclusion will be how we can utilize all our energies or the positive forces to come up with a way forward, what can be the new alternatives. For example, another new alternative can be, instead of looking at China as a threat in the neighborhood, because which it is actually interacting a lot with our entire Indian neighborhood. Look at it as an opportunity for India and China to work together in the neighborhood, because that is the only way you can allay the concerns of your neighbors. They will always play the China card, so why not play along? In fact, have better relationships with China and tell them that, look, you can't blackmail us on the China issue, so come up with an alternative. So this is the kind of answer you require to write. All right, is it understood? Okay, let's come on to the next part. So in 1991, let's look at the entire events, how they have happened in the Kala Pani issue. This pass was again opened for trade. In 1998, during 1991, Nepal did not raise the dispute with us. It said, fine, whatever India wants to do, you're welcome, Rishabh. So whatever India wants to do in the Kala Pani area, they can actually carry on with that. But in 1998, Nepal brought the issue of Kala Pani before India and said that, look, we really need to actually demarcate our outstanding areas, including Kala Pani and Susta, and we should do it really soon. So it was discussed to some measure in 2000, but then no further actually inroads were made into that dispute. So that dispute has remained. Now what happened recently? Let's move back to 2015. In 2015, we had a new government come up in India. So Modi had just sworn in, and we really wanted to have good relationships with China and all our neighbors. So it was the neighborhood policy first, as I've already talked about in my previous lectures, that to 2014, since 2014, it has been a part of Act East policy, neighborhood first policy, and also a highly energetic engagement with all our neighbors and the rest of the world policy. Now, so India, China decided to open a trading post at Lippu Lake. They said we'll make it a full-fledged trading post, and also we'll open it for the Kailash Mansarovar pilgrims to easily move over to China. The post was opened. Now, it was not taken very well in the Nepalese media. Nepalese people said that it's a tri-junction and we already have a boundary dispute with India which is not resolved. So how can India alter the situation at the Lippu Lake Pass bilaterally along with China? You didn't even take us into consideration. So that's a huge blow to Nepalese sovereignty over that region. So Nepal registered a dispute. But the dispute got further enhanced when in May 2020, it has happened on 8th May only, Indian Defence Minister virtually inaugurated a 80-kilometer link road for Mansarovar Yatra between India and China along the Lippu Lake Pass, so that the time of travel between Mansarovar Yatra can be reduced. At that point of time, Nepal was mad with the rage. They said, you have completely overlooked us. You didn't discuss the boundary issue, you didn't settle the boundary, and you went along creating a road into our boundary. And that's when Nepal released a new political map that claimed Kalapani, Limpi Adhura, Lipi Lake of Uttarakhand as a part of Nepal's territory, and also the area of Susta, that is in the West Champaran district of Bihar. You all know what Champaran is famous for. The 1917 struggle in Champaran is very, very famous. Uh, one of the first struggles that Gandhi had in India was in Champaran, right? So it's a very, very famous place. That was also placed in the new map of Nepal. So Nepal came up with this political map unilaterally, and without even discussing the boundary issue with India, it said, since you did not discuss it with us, we will also not discuss it with you, and came up with a new political map. And that's why I showed you this cartoon here, that both Modi and Oli are waking up to new political maps within their own regions. And you can see Modi looking slightly surprised that new map has come up all of a sudden. With that, when they came up with the new map, India did not obviously like it. So India told Nepal that, look, you should refrain from any unilateral change of the boundaries and we should resolve the issue through talks. But Nepal has been very vociferous and it did not listen to India. It went ahead and passed the map in its assembly or in its parliament and came up with a new political map. Yes, the Gandhi Satyagraha. What is Nepal's stand in this whole dispute? Nepal says that the Kali River originates from a stream at Limpi Adhura, northwest of Lipu Lake. So further off Lipu Lake. Thus Kala Pani and Limpi Adhura, Lipu Lake all fall to the east of the river and are a part of Nepal's Dharchula district, which I already told you. They also said that Lipu Lake was deleted from the Nepal's map by the kings to get favors from India, as I've already told you. So 1991 only we had opened a trade post at Lipu Lake, but that time no confusions were made from the side of Nepal. No representations were made from the side of Nepal because the Nepalese king were okay with Lipu Lake being used by us because they were getting additional favors from India. In fact, the territory of Kalapani was offered to India by King Mahendra after the 1962 India-China war because they wanted to help India in India's security concerns due to perceived lingering Chinese threats. And as I have already told you, the Lipu Lake Pass is at 20,000 feet, which is also higher than the Nathula Pass in Sikkim, which is at 14,000 feet. So, whenever you talk about international politics or war, the higher you are on a territory, the easier for it is to look at the enemy territory. So, it's a very, very strategic vantage point for us. Now, at that point of time, Kalapani was not even a part of India and Nepal dispute because Nepal's territory, it was only Nepal's territory that the king had given to India for its own use. So the new map is actually documenting what was in circulation in Nepal till the 1950s. So Nepal says Limpi Adhura, Lipu Lake or Kalapani have always been a part of Nepal. We just gave it to you, loaned it out to you for a while. You can't claim it to be your own territory and do whatever you choose to at the Lipu Lake Pass. What is India's stand? India says that Kali River originates in the spring well below the Lipu Lake Pass and not in the Lipu Lake Pass. That means they happen at the Kalapani campgrounds, which is there in the Pithoragarh district of Uttarakhand. And the Sugauli district does not actually demarcate the area north of these streams. So whatever happens in the springs that are happening in the Lipu Lake Pass or around that is not covered by the Sugauli Treaty. So India is not bound by that. And finally, the administrative and revenue records of the 19th century show Kalapani in the Indian side or the Indian side of the Pithoragarh district of Uttarakhand. So historically it has belonged to India. That is what is India's stand. So what are the current issues involved? So as I've always told, whether it was India-China dispute or any other boundary dispute that happens around the world, the issue is that majorly of distrust. The issue becomes a bigger issue when some third party comes in. Alright, so this is what has happened here also. India thinks Nepal is making a deliberate issue of the Lipu Lake Pass. Why? Because it comes at the tri-junction of India, China and Nepal. So as per India, Nepal is trying to play the China card, and since India and China are already not on good terms in the Ladakh region, Nepal thinks it's a good time to actually further take its expansionist policies and take the Lipu Lake Pass back, or maybe just gain some limelight for this issue and show to the world that India has been unreasonable with Nepal also and kind of support China also. So we are thinking that China might be behind Nepal's recent litigious tendencies. that China is actually asking Nepal to do and raise a dispute with India without any rhyme or reason. Also, KP Oli, the current Prime Minister of Nepal, has been actually continuously tilting towards China. We'll also study the fourth part of the dispute, that Nepal's deemed closeness with China. So KP Oli has been very, very considerate and very much tilting towards China, which India is not liking. And Nepal already knows that. So it's kind of Nepal is trying to irritate India by again and again bringing up this dispute just at the behest of China. So to actually put pressure on India in the international community and to show to other nations that India is acting in a very, very demean way. India is actually pressurizing its neighbors. India is not a good neighbor. That is what Nepal wants to show to the rest of the world. So right now, despite the open border between the two countries, people to people contact, the level of distrust is very high between Nepal and India. And with recent Nepali tendencies to fall into the Chinese lap or to actually raise disputes like this, Nepal is not being looked as very friendly, in a very friendly manner in India also. See, even the questions that you guys have been asking me off late, that is Nepal a friend or enemy? So it shows how our perceptions change with relations to whatever happens at the borders, right? Okay, there's another doubt here. See, what you have to write, I'll give you a very important tip. In fact, I wanted to discuss before we even began this session. See, I could have taken these sessions in the form of question and answers, but then you do not get a complete overview of the issue. So, as a part of these sessions, I will try to tell you from A to Z the international relations which India has with all of these countries, right? I will also give you a direction regarding the foreign policy initiatives that we take. What are you required to do? After listening to these lectures, you are supposed to find the strategic points of the discussion. See, the facts are never important. What is important is what you make of those facts. What is the opinion that you're gaining out of that? Because as a civil servant, yes, you're required to know facts, that where is Lipu Lake, visit in India, is it in Uttarakhand? These are the facts that you need to know. But what is more important for you to know is, why are all these boundary disputes strategically important? Why is Jammu Kashmir important to us? Because it's the northern boundary, and you cannot have two hostile neighbors encroaching your northern boundary. So that is the opinion that you're supposed to write in your answers. How will you be able to write them? You will only be able to write those answers in the exams when you know completely about the geography of the nations involved, completely about the strategic interest involved, and completely about the chronology involved in the dispute. So first, try to understand the entire dispute, the entire chronology of events that happens between two nations in a line. Once you have done that, go back again and rethink the entire issue in your mind, that what were the important things, why are we fighting? See, we will never fight over material issues, we are always fighting over ideological issues. So once you are clear with the material issues, now try to find in your own words the ideological issues that are involved between the two nations, and that is what you're supposed to write in your answers. So it will take some time, all right? You can write your answers and send them to me. It will take some time to formulate that views. That won't come in one day. In one day, you can only learn about the facts. So that will take some time. So rewatch these lectures again and again to actually get an idea of what has actually happened strategically. Or read a lot more about them in the opinion sections of the newspaper. That will actually help you make the opinion that why something is happening. Once you understand that why is what you're supposed to write in the exam, supporting that why with some of the facts that you have collected along the way. So my job here is to provide you with both the facts and to a certain extent the why. But that why of why all these things is happening is my own opinion, or is the opinion that I've collected from the newspapers for you. But you still need to build your opinion to write the answers correctly. So that part of the answer writing you have to do yourself. All right? Yes, obviously, whenever you write an answer, you have to look from both sides. What China thinks or what Nepal thinks and what India thinks. Only then you can write a very, very comprehensive answer. All right? Okay. The fourth area of dispute and the last one. So another 10 minutes of the session left. This is very, very interesting. So look at it very, very closely. It's a very, very interesting point. Okay. As you can see, it's a dice in which India and Nepal are on two sides, or they are neighbors, and which is being played by China. All right, these cartoons are very, very informative. Another one is Nepal trying to act as a balancing point, or trying to balance its interest both with its mighty, mighty neighbors, India and China. And the third one, Modi being very wary of Nepalese or Chinese incursion into Nepal, or how Nepal is trying to view. So we are viewing it with a binocular. We really want to understand what is going on between China and Nepal. We are very, very distrustful of China. So we are actually not distrustful. Another strategic point here is we are not distrustful of Nepal. We are distrustful of China's designs in our neighborhood. We don't want China to become a regional hegemon in our neighborhood. If you really want to understand this area of dispute, that what is happening with Chinese closeness to Nepal, please go back to the India-China neighborhood relations, where I have covered how both of these parties, India and Nepal, India and China, are trying to become a regional hegemon in the neighborhood, and what is the implications for it. So I've discussed that in detail in the India-China relations. So whenever you want to write your answers, you will have to revisit these lectures again and again to get those strategic points and to write the answers in a chronological manner. Okay, what is the area of dispute? So India, as you know, India actually could not keep up its promises on the mega power projects. India is only giving money and money to the Nepalis, but it is not actually respecting them, as we saw what Indian media did during the time of earthquake. Third, Nepal is not landlocked but India locked. That means Nepal completely depends on India for any sort of transit or transportation needs. So obviously Nepal will think in its own interest, right? So after thinking in its own interest, Nepal decided to have a closer collaboration with China. So Nepal said, why should India only finance and collaborate with us in the water resources? We will also give Chinese these projects so that China can invest and make our hydropower projects come to life, which India has not been able to do. And why was China given these projects? Because China is very well known for its project execution. It is doing that all around the world. So Nepal said, let us get in China. Maybe it will help us economically and also help us in developing our energy resources. So China was got into that. So it's actually India's failure there that China had to come in there. Second, Prime Minister Oli actually signed an MOU with China to build a strategic railway link connecting Tibet and Kathmandu. Right? So not just they wanted China to invest in Nepal financially or to develop its energy resources, they said that, just to counter the complete dependence on India for accessing any third world trade, let's have connectivity with China and let's start building a railway link so that we can send out our goods to China, which can then be sent out to Chinese ports, and thus we can have third country trades with other countries through the medium of China and through the ports of China. So I will just briefly explain you what are the railway links and the port links that are being planned between Nepal and China. So the first one is the train link. So China to Nepal on train. This is the news which came in 2015. All right, when there was an economic blockade. All right. The line was expected to be completed by 2020. Obviously, this hasn't happened given the current corona crisis. And obviously, such rail links take a lot of time to actually formulate. So as you can see, Nepal signed a train link with China that was between Kathmandu in Nepal to Lhasa in China. All right. And that would go through an underground tunnel built under the Mount Everest. The trains will be running at 120 km per hour. All right. So this was supposed to be a 540 km train link between China and Nepal. Now, it was actually an extension of the Qinghai Tibet line, which China already has in its Tibetan region, that links rest of the China with Tibetan capital Lhasa and beyond. So it was supposed to be an extension to that, and they would actually further take it to Kathmandu. So you can they actually tried to make this entire part as a part of the BRI initiative. China extended this railway line to Nepal as a part of the Belt and Road Initiative. And as I've already discussed, in the Belt and Road Initiative, the roads actually stand for the railway links that China is trying to build across the entire old Silk Route, the entire old Silk Route through the land regions. So it is building roads and it is building railways in the areas to connect the entire 70 countries of the world. Now, this hasn't fallen through yet, but this is one of the projects that are underway. Linked to that is the accessibility to alternative trade routes for Nepal through the sea links or the port links. So Nepal said that once we have the train connectivity till Lhasa, from Kathmandu to Lhasa, and then from Lhasa onwards to the rest of the parts in China, China also gave access to Nepal on its 4 ports: Tianjin port, Liangyungang port, Shenzhen port, and Zhangjiang port. Now, as you can see in this map, the Nepal is actually closer to the Kolkata port, which is just 774 kilometers away, and the Vishakhapatnam port, which is again less than 2000 kilometers away. And if you see all these 4 ports to which China has given access to Nepal, these are all on the eastern coast of Nepal, and the closest one being the Zhangjiang port, which is again 3000 kilometers away. So is it even feasible? Even when Nepal and China have signed a transit and transport agreement in 2018, this is a very, very recent one, can Nepali traders actually use the rail or road to access these seaports, because they're very, very far. It's economically not viable. All right. Nepal has been given to access to Chinese territory to 6 checkpoints. But even then, the amount of distance that the goods have to travel makes this entire thing very unviable unless you have very, very high speed trains or you're carrying the cargo through planes. Otherwise, this entire thing becomes very, very expensive for Nepal, and it is not to be very viable in the near future. So these 2 points you have to keep in mind, because we'll be discussing it in the way forward. Because if it is not viable for Nepal to actually go ahead with China, that means Nepal will have to come back to India. There's no other way to it. It's the closest one. It has cultural ties, it has historical ties, and up till now Nepal has been actually exporting through the ports of Kolkata and Vishakhapatnam. So the infrastructure is already there. The another problem, the another roadblock, apart from the distance that these ports have from Nepal, is that there is no proper infrastructure on the side of Nepal to actually carry the goods to these far off places. So there'll be a huge investment of money. And given China's present condition, when it's in a dispute with the entire South China Sea or is in dispute with the major powers of the world, we do not see this actually falling through. And of course, Nepal cannot just trust Chinese designs. China hasn't been good to any of its neighbors. It's already having a dispute with Nepal relating to the Mount Everest, and it's already in dispute with a lot of neighborhood countries. So Nepal shouldn't think it will be any better with China than it is better with India. China will not be doing any favors to Nepal, which it hasn't done to any of its other neighbors. Wherever it has invested money, it is trying to keep all those neighbors under its thumb and trying to meddle in their internal politics. So whoever pays you money will actually do that. It's like a neo-colonialism by China. Whatever happened with the British in the past is what China is doing in the present. And the third thing, we already talked about the cross-Himalayan connectivity network. We talked about the railway link. We talked about the ports. All right. So that's there. And also, Nepal is seeking Beijing support or Chinese support in providing oil. So when the economic blockade of 2015 happened, Indian Oil did not send its fuel trucks to Nepal, and there was a severe shortage of LPG gas there. So Nepal wants to end India's monopoly over Nepal's fuel imports, and it is asking China to actually forge a strategic relationship with Kathmandu to give Kathmandu weapons and oil both, which have till now been dominated by India. All right. In fact, China helped Nepal with weapons during the constitutional crisis, and when the monarch King Birendra completely overtook the executive powers in his hand during the 2005 dispute or the 2005 civil war within Nepal. Finally, the trade in transit agreement, as I just mentioned, regarding the Chinese ports of Tianjin, Shenzhen, Liang and Zhangjiang was recently signed in 2018. So not only Nepal has a trade in transit transport agreement with India, which was signed in 1996 and is due for renewal now, it also has a transit and transport agreement with China now. what is the way forward? Now this is the most important topic for today's lecture. So given our strong ties of food and marriage, roti and beti ka rishta, you can actually use this word in your answers. India should not delay in dealing with the matter of boundary dispute and settle it, because we are already facing a face-off with China in Ladakh and Sikkim. So we really do not want another hostile neighbor to be in there. First point. Second point, we already know there's a free movement of people permitted across the border, and Nepal enjoys immense strategic relevance from India's national security point of view. So if there is an open border, there is a huge chance that the terrorist activities will flare up from the Nepali side if we do not maintain friendly relations. Because if we maintain friendly relations, then Nepal will actually help us in curbing those terrorist activities that can happen from the Nepalese border. So here is a doubt. I will just like Sri Lanka, what? Can you please elaborate, Obed? What is your question? If you're talking about the roti beti ties, that is the food and the marriage ties, yes, it is just like with Sri Lanka. So Tamilians and Sri Lankans have a lot in common than they have with the rest of India. So yes, it's just like with Sri Lanka there. Again, stable and friendly nations with Nepal is one of the prerequisites which India can't afford to overlook, which we've already discussed. Also, 6 to 8 Nepali citizens actually live in India today. So Nepal should also look forward towards it, that the way India has opened its borders, the way India has been supporting Nepal throughout the history, no other country would do that, because too much history of good relationships is already there with India. You cannot establish a similar history with another larger neighbor, China. However, you can involve China in your development, but you cannot completely forego your Indian neighbor, because India again is a very, very strong neighbor, both geographically, economically, and size wise. And obviously you cannot alter the geography, so Nepal has to understand that you are surrounded by India on 3 fronts. So you cannot completely depend on China for all your needs. You have to come back to India. So it is a prerequisite for Nepal to maintain friendly relationships with India. And obviously any thoughtless erosion of this centuries old togetherness may prove to be difficult for both the countries. Both the countries cannot live without one another. And so they should take their existing bilateral treaties forward, and Himalayan rivers should be taken into consideration. But instead of having mega power projects, so we should already complete whatever we have promised. But other than that, we should take up some smaller hydropower projects which we can complete in time, so that Nepal's energy needs are met up. Also, we should try to resolve the boundary dispute ASAP. Now when it has come to the forefront, it is time to actually sit for the bilateral talks and discuss it. We should revive the SAARC, and we should discuss the India-Nepal boundary issues there along the SAARC talks or the SAARC bilateral talks. Also, India should maintain the policy of keeping away from internal affairs of Nepal, and India should also respect the sovereignty of Nepal. If Nepal wants to go and engage with China on a further level, India should also increase its engagement with China, and should not see China as a threat. See, if we provide Nepal with better facilities, better economics, Nepal will never fully transit towards China, because even Nepal knows, everybody internationally knows, that China is an aggressor and India is not an aggressor. We might behave erratically sometimes, but we are definitely not an aggressor. We are a peace-loving country. We are a democratic country, unlike China. So if we keep our end of the relationship clean, Nepal will automatically come back to us. So we don't have to put any extra effort in that part. Also, finally, Nepal should realize that the facilities that India can provide by the virtue of its geography, the similarity in the culture and politics, or the clout that India has in international politics will never be matched by China. It can provide you with money, but it can never provide you with the soft power that you enjoy being with India. With that, folks, I will close for today. Are there any more doubts that you want me to address, or are we good to go? Hope you enjoyed today's session. All right. Any other doubts, guys? This is my Telegram group link for current affairs, where I post all my upcoming videos. All right. And you can chat with me here. This is my Telegram group link, channel link, where I post all my upcoming videos on international relations, or all my upcoming videos on the Unacademy platform also. And obviously, if you like the video, please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to Let's Crack UPSC CSE in English, so that you do not miss out on any other important updates from our side, or on any other important videos from our side. Also hit the bell icon for more notifications from me. And use my code SBUS to get an instant 10% discount on your membership at Unacademy, which will make it less than 40,000 for a 1-year course and less than 40,000 for a 1-year course and less than 30,000 for a 2-year subscription if you use my code SBUS for any subscription under the UPSC CSE category. Alright, folks, this is the best time to actually enroll in our courses because Aditya, I will not be able to provide the PDF of these sessions till the time I'm actually able to complete it. Alright, thank you, Jatin. So please use my code SBUS to get an instant 10% off on your UPSC CSE subscription at Unacademy. This is the best time to actually get our subscriptions because prelims is round the corner and we have some really good courses to offer to you. So we can be your mentors in your civil services preparation both for UPSC 2020 and 2021. The courses for 2021, UPSC 2021 are already up and running on the Unacademy website. So stay ahead of others, enroll in those courses and all the best for your preparation. Thank you, folks. With that, I'll close for today. Please join my Telegram link or Telegram channel for further notifications on the IR series.